For those of you who don't know, the UN General Assembly has started. Every September, leaders all over the nation come to New York, in the UN, and they'll be giving speeches about their country, about their plans. Some of them ask for more funds. So we have different speeches. And this year, I was very impressed with President Ahmadinejad's speech. He gave a brilliant speech at the UN. And like usual, he does this every year, and diplomats of Western countries will get up and leave, like they usually do. But I thought today what I was going to do is to actually read highlight of his speech. The parts that I find very interesting. This is not the whole speech. I think the speech lasted about 30 minutes. For those of you who love to have the speech, you can go online and you get the whole speech in English. Dear colleagues and friends, it is vividly clear that despite all historical achievements, including creation of the United Nations, which was a product of untiring struggles and efforts of free-minded and justice-seeking individuals, as well as the international cooperation, human societies are yet far from fulfilling their noble desires and aspirations. Most nations of the world are unhappy with the current international circumstances. And despite the general longing and aspiration to promote peace, progress, and fraternity, war, mass murder, widespread poverty, and socio-economic and political crisis continue to infringe upon the rights and sovereignty of nations, leaving behind irreparable damage worldwide. Approximately 3 billion people of the world live on less than $2.5 a day. And over 1 billion people live without having even one sufficient meal on a daily basis. 40% of poorest world populations only share 5% of global income, while 20% of the richest people share 75% of the total global income. More than 20,000 innocent and destitute children die every day in the world because of poverty. In the United States, only 20% of these resources belong to 90% of the population. What are the causes and reasons behind these inequalities? How can one remedy such injustice? The rulers of the global management circle divide the social life from ethic and spiritually, while claiming the situation is the outcome of pursuit of path of divine profit or vulnerability of nations or the ill performance of a few groups or individuals. They claim that only their views and approaches can save the human society. Dear colleagues and friends, would you think that the root cause of the problems must be sought in the prevailing international order or the way the world is governed? I would like to draw your kind attention to the following questions. Who abducted forcibly tens of millions of people from their homes in Africa and other nations of the world during the dark period of slavery, making them a victim of their materialistic greed? Who occupied lands and massively plundered resources of other nations, destroyed talents, and alienated languages, cultures, and identities of nations? Who triggered the First and the Second World Wars that left 70 million killed and hundreds of millions injured or homeless, who created the war in Korean Peninsula and Vietnam, who imposed through deceits and hypocrisy the Zionism and over 60 years of war, homelessness, terror, and mass murder on Palestinian people and on countries of the region, who imposed and supported for decades military dictatorship and totalitarian regimes on Asian, African, and Latin American nations, who used nuclear bomb against defenseless people and stockpiled thousands of warheads in their arsenals, whose economies rely on waging wars and selling arms, who provoked and encouraged Saddam Hussein to invade and impose an 8-year war on Iran, and who assisted and equipped him to deploy chemical weapons against our cities and our people, who used the mysterious September 11 incident as a pretext to attack Afghanistan and Iraq, killing, injuring, and displacing millions in 2 countries with ultimate goal of bringing into its domination the Middle East and its oil resources, who nullified the Bretton Woods system by printing trillions of dollars without backing of gold reserves or equivalent currency, a move that triggered inflation worldwide and was intended to prey on the economic gains of other nations. Which country's military spending exceeds annually $1,000 billion, more than the military budget of all countries of the world combined? Which governments are the most indebted ones in the world? Who dominates the policies-making establishment of the world's economy? Who are responsible for the world's economy recession and are imposing the consequences on America, Europe, and the world in general? Which governments are always ready to drop thousands of bombs on other countries, but ponder and hesitate to provide aid to famine-stricken people in Somalia or in other places? Who are the ones dominating the Security Council, which is ostensibly responsible for safeguarding the international security? There exist tens of other similar questions. Of course, the answers are clear. The majority of nations and governments of the world have had no role in the creation of the current global crisis, and as a matter of fact, they were themselves the victims of such policies. It is as lucid as daylight that the same slave masters and colonial powers that once instigated the 2 world wars have caused widespread misery and disorder with far-reaching effect across the globe since then. Dear colleagues and friends, do these arrogant powers really have the competence and ability to run or govern the world? Is it acceptable that they call themselves the sole defender of freedom, democracy, and human rights while they militarily attack and occupy other countries? Can the flower of democracy blossom from NATO's missiles, bombs, and guns? Ladies and gentlemen, if some European countries still use the Holocaust after 6 decades as the excuse to pay fine or ransom to the Zionists, should it not be an obligation upon the slave masters or colonial powers to pay reparations to the affected nations? If the damage and losses of the period of slavery and colonialism were indeed compensated, what would happen to the manipulators and behind-the-scene political powers in the United States and in Europe? Would there remain any gaps between the North and the South? If only half of military expenditure of the United States and its allies in NATO was shifted to help solve the economic problems in their own countries, would they be witnessing any symptom of economic crisis? What would happen if the same amount was allocated to poor nations? What is the justification for the presence of hundreds of U.S. military and intelligence bases in different parts of the world, including 268 bases in Germany, 124 in Japan, 87 in South Korea, 83 in Italy, 45 in the United Kingdom, and 21 in Portugal? Does this mean anything other than military occupation? Don't the bombs deployed in the said bases undermine the security of other nations? Ladies and gentlemen, the main question is the quest for the root cause of such attitudes. The prime reason should be sought in the belief and tendencies of the establishment. An assembly of people in contradiction with the inner human instinct and disposition, who also have no faith in God and in the path of the divine prophets, replace their lust for power and materialistic ends with heavenly values. To them, only power and wealth prevail, and every attempt must bring into focus these sinister goals. Oppressed nations have no hope to restore or protect their legitimate right against these powers. These powers seek their progress, prosperity, and dignity through imposing poverty, humiliation, and annihilations to others. They consider themselves superior to others, enjoying special privileges and concessions. They have no respect for others and easily violate the rights of all nations and governments. They proclaim themselves as the indisputable custodians of all government and nations through intimidation, recourse to threat and force, and abuse the international mechanism. They simply break all the internationally recognized regulations. They insist on imposing their lifestyle and belief on others. They officially support racism. They weaken countries through military intervention and destroy their infrastructures in order to plunder their resources by making them all the more independent. They sow the seeds of hate and hostility among nations and people of different pursuit in order to prevent them from fulfilling their goals of development and progress. All cultures, identities, lives, values, and wealth of nations, women, youth, families, as well as the wealth of nations are sacrificed to their imperialistic tendency and their inclination to enslave and captivate others. Hypocrisy and deceit are allowed in order to secure their interest and imperialistic goals. Drug trafficking and killing of innocent human beings are also allowed in pursuit of such diabolic goals. Despite NATO's presence in the occupied Afghanistan, there has been a dramatic increase in the production of illicit drugs there. They tolerate no question or criticism, and instead of presenting a reason for their violations, they always put themselves in the position of a claimant. By using their imperialistic media network, which is under the influence of colonialism, they threaten anyone who questions the Holocaust and the September 11 event with sanctions and military action. Last year, when the need to form a fact-finding team to undertake a thorough investigation concerning the hidden elements involved in September 11 incident was brought up, an idea also endorsed by all independent governments and nations as well as by the majority in the United States, my country and myself came under pressure and threat by the government of the United States. Instead of assigning a fact-finding team, they killed the main perpetrator and threw his body into the sea. Would it not have been reasonable to bring to justice and openly bring to trial the main perpetrator of the incident in order to identify the elements behind the safe space provided for the invading aircraft to attack the Twin World Trade Towers? Why should it not have been allowed to bring him to trial to help recognize those who launched terrorist groups and brought wars and other miseries into the region? Is there any classified information that must be kept secret? They view Zionism as a sacred notion and ideology. Any question concerning its very foundation and history is condemned by them as an unforgivable sin. However, they endorse and allow sacrileges and insult against beliefs of other divine religions. Dear colleagues and friends, real freedom, justice, dignity, well-being, and lasting security are the right of all nations. These values can neither be achieved by reliance on the current inefficient system of world governance, nor through the invasion of the world by arrogant powers and the gun barrels of NATO forces. These values could only be realized through independence and recognition of others' rights and through harmony and cooperation. Is there any way to address the problems and challenges besetting the world by using the prevailing international mechanism and tools to help humanity achieve the long-standing aspiration of peace, security, and equality? All those who try to introduce reforms whilst preserving the existing norms and tendency have failed. The valuable effort made by the non-aligned movement and Group 77 and Group IS, as well as by some prominent individuals, have failed to bring fundamental changes. Governance and management of the world require fundamental reforms. This is not the whole speech. If you want to find the rest of the speech, you can always go online. As the president of Iran was giving this speech, President Ahmadinejad, the diplomats of the United States, England, And France got up and left the room. So my question is this. Why leave? Is it guilt? If you know what this man is saying is not true, why do you get up and leave? Those who are evil cannot accept the truth. Their reason of getting up, first of all, is because they are trying to disrupt the whole thing. They don't want other people to hear the truth. And second of all, because they just cannot take it. They can't take it. It is too real. They see themselves. And some people stand up and call this man, the president of Iran, a dictator. Do they even know what dictating means? You can go on a dictionary and find out. I'm not going to tell you what it means. But one thing I do know is that in the United States of America, we have two political parties. How come we never allow other political parties? In the Republican Party today, there are more than 2 candidates who are running for president, but they are only showing 2. The media is only talking about these 2 candidates. Isn't that dictating? When we are quick to call others dictators. Ahmadinejad has been in power now. This is his, I believe, his second and last term in power. In Iran, the supreme leader is actually the leader of the country. So in 2013, they will go through another election. And that will be President Ahmadinejad last year. So when you call him a dictator, what are you basing your fact on? Iran is a free country where people actually get to speak their mind. If you go to Iran, they don't strip search people in airports. You won't see a police state. You will see a developed country, beautiful country. And what I like about this whole thing so much is that the truth is starting to come out. People are hearing the truth now. Every time we get close to 9/11, more American people are asking themselves the question, was it an inside job? President Obama has been in power 1 term only. He already has gray hair. The man looks like he's way older than President Ahmadinejad. When you do evil things, that's what happens. You get old and ugly. Not every old people are ugly. But those who do evil, that's how they are. They get old and ugly. We demonize everybody else. Muslims are bad people. In order for you to be a legitimate killer, in order for you to be a legitimate criminal, you have to be Christian. Once you call yourself Christian and then they can allow you to massacre as many people as possible, that is a shame. We just use this word Christian, and when you say you're a Christian, oh, okay, you are now allowed to kill everybody you want to kill. But if you claim to be anything other than Christian, especially if you claim to be Muslim, oh man, you're a terrorist. That's how they put it. President Bush said he was a Christian. It was okay for him to go to Iraq. It was okay for him to go to Afghanistan because he's a Christian. This is a shame. This is a shame. The reality is that they are not Christians, those who are committing those crimes, or Muslim. No, they're not. Any religion that believes in God does not allow any crime. There is no positive killing. War is wrong. And that is a fact. You don't resolve anything with war. President Obama is on the campaign trail and talking about bringing the economy back. The reality is that you cannot bring the economy back in a nation that is at war. Stop fooling the American people. Washington is worrying about nuclear weapon in Iran, worrying about China, worrying about Russia. Let me tell you one thing, Washington. Mr. President, and your Congress members and senators. Let me tell you one thing. You are going too far. The people you should be worrying about is the American people. Because when they do find out the truth, when the truth comes to light, they will destroy Washington. Because you are not representing the American people. The American people are not that evil. It is because there are still good people in this country that this country has not fallen. But I can promise you one thing, Washington. You will fall, and it won't come from the outside. It will come from the inside. It will be the American people.